Hi GHAF family, we are welcoming you again to another week of virtual church. We had quarantine this week. It was kind of interesting. I hope you're keeping busy, staying well most importantly, and connecting with others. It was nice last week on the Zoom session to talk to the church family who joined us and to see just ways that this was impacting them, to catch up with each other, and also just share where we felt God was leading. One of the questions that came up was, where is God in all this? What are we doing with that? How are we responding ourselves in our own personal walk and in reaching out to others? And I was thinking about that and found some verses I wanted to share with you. In Isaiah 42:16, he says, I will lead the blind by ways they have not known. Along unfamiliar paths, I will guide them. I will turn the darkness into light before them and make the rough places smooth. These are the things I will do. I will not forsake them. And then in Isaiah 54:10, he continues, though the mountains be shaken and the hills be removed, yet my unfailing love for you will not be shaken, nor my covenant of peace be removed, says the Lord who has compassion on you. His compassion and his love is never ending and unfailing. And we'd like to affirm that right now as we lead you, and join us in Stand in Your Love.
When darkness tries to roll over my bones, when sorrow comes to steal the joy I own, when brokenness and pain is all I know, I won't be shaken, I won't be shaken. The cross has washed my sins as white as snow. A greater love the earth has never known. The sacrifice you made, it gives me hope, so I can keep living this life I've been given. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in
how's everybody doing? How's everybody keeping busy and during the quarantine? How are you keeping busy, Sean?
Let me get my list that Ron has for me. I've actually been working up until 2 days ago, but since then, no, there are no end of projects around here at the lake house, and of course, also it's a good time to practice the drums, the cajon. We've been doing a lot of movie watching, a lot of sitting around reading together, and it's no end of activity around here. So I'm happy with the time so far.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people who they haven't been working for now a few weeks and are starting to go stir crazy. So
yeah, I can see that coming.
How about you, Russ and Sue? How are you guys keeping busy?
Like Sean said, there's never a shortage of projects. Being in school and putting everything on the back burner for the past couple years, I'm definitely catching up on all of my little, projects. Reading furniture and painting rooms and things like that, and binge watching bad TV shows.
Have you guys watched the Tiger King?
Yeah.
We have staff who are watching that. We haven't
This
watched
show
it.
is nuts. Chloe and I, after the first episode, we were like, "Oh no, we'll be like." I think we got the kind of gist of the show, and then 3 episodes in, we're like, "We did not see any of this coming." But well, now Sue, so you. Sorry, what was that?
If you ever feel bad about yourself, watch that show. You feeling fantastic about your life.
For sure. Well, now, Sue, you live with a contractor. How many walls have you torn out of the house so far?
He won't let me tear down any walls.
Russ, how are you keeping busy?
I have an office in the front of the house, and she's never had a place, so she's actually now got her own office and place.
Oh, nice.
So she's working on that, and all the furniture that goes in finishing. I don't know why. I like the color it was, but
because he always teases me that it doesn't matter what color it is, I'm going to make it a different color.
that's okay. I'm good with it.
Well, Russ, how are you keeping busy?
We're doing pretty good. I actually spend most of my time outside. The first week that we were sort of in the quarantine status was really nice. I think, Michelle, you guys experienced it well. And then the next week wasn't so nice, so it was a little harder. So it drove me into the shop, which is really needs a ton of work. So that's what I've been for the.
There you go.
And today we actually decided, feeling a little, I don't know, cabin fever. We took a drive. Actually, we went down and saw Mike and Tammy. And that was nice to get out of the house and
Very much so.
different, just both the ride and the really nice. So
Yeah.
Because we quarantined March 16th.
yeah, middle of March.
March 16th is came home and just
Yeah. It's been a while now, a couple of weeks, and we're going into our third. So how about you, Ron and Michelle? How are you guys keeping busy?
Well, there's no end of projects here.
Tell the truth.
Yeah, right.
If you're bored here, you're not trying, or you're not looking at my list. There really is list. We actually did some finished work in the basement, hung some sheetrock, and did some fence post pounding. Thank you, Sean. And this and that, and I've been able to work a little bit just with emergencies and that kind of thing. And Michelle has been not standing around either.
Yeah, I think it's just the nature of owning a business through this, and I'm spending a lot of time trying to keep up with the laws and what's just come out, and connecting with all our staff to make sure they're okay, and helping them through unemployment, Anyway, I'm ready to go back to work because that was way easier than this. Anyway, so I'm looking forward to, I've been crocheting some more, so that's kind of my fun by the time the day ends, and I'm like, I'm just sitting here and crocheting. So anyway.
Well, nice. I didn't get away from some of the work too. Chloe decided she was going a little crazy and decided that she wanted to tear up the linoleum in our laundry room. And then that turned into smelling some mold, so tearing up the subfloor and then putting in self-leveling concrete for the first time with a drill that didn't work very well. That drill to mix it that didn't work very well, and having to scramble to get that, and then putting in the linoleum, but then not getting enough glue, so having to go to Home Depot 4 times. So it's been I should have asked a couple of you guys for some advice.
It's
the
joy of owning a home.
Yeah.
Well, so here's the question I've been asking all of the everyone that we've been doing this with, and I'm really curious. I may have to look up some stuff because I am younger than you. But here's my question: what's the worst style that you've ever rocked in your life? And
you're looking at it.
Hey, that's not
the male
bad.
pattern baldness. I think Madison and Reagan would agree that I have no style right now, and I don't know what to do about it. It's not getting any better. But I've been working this for 20 years, and I'm stuck with it. Now, but going back to the 80s, I never had or 90s. I never had a mullet, but I had long hair. I thought was pretty cool. I look back on pictures now, and I just looked unkempt and greasy. But yeah, that was probably. I've always been pretty average, and just the eyes odd shirts. I guess that was probably.
That's not.
Eyes odd, and shorts that were way too short. You remember those, Sue? Yeah, I know. Oh, and cutoffs. Yeah. I still like cutoffs.
Yeah, right. I was gonna say you and Ron still have those jean cutoff shorts.
Russ and Sue, what have been your worst style moments?
Back late 80s, early 90s with the whoosh, closer to God, the really
big
tight
hair,
perms, sort of frizzy
perms.
Yeah.
Did you do any fun colors on your hair? I remember I was in California. We did I messed around with home color. Oh my word, it was horrid. Like the bleach blonde and then the perm thing. Oh, yeah.
High school, well, because growing up on the beach, and so it was always the skin to make your hair as white as possible. Like when I first got out of high school, the punk scene where, purple and then blue or green or whatever. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, Russ, I'm curious if I don't even know what to expect coming out of
you. Russ, put your collar up.
Oh, I have.
You know what, Sean? I hate to say this. I saw a picture of you with your collar.
Even with my collar.
So,
exactly.
I never.
Yeah. I forgot about.
You have to understand something here, and I don't know how to. I'm just going to tell you. We talked about this today. I said, well, you mean the 60s and 70s? That's when I grew up. She said, no, the 70s and 80s. I didn't grow up in the 70s.
Oh.
I was born in 61. So I was like an adult by the time the 80s rolled around. My picture is different from all these folks by a decade, pretty much. So what I'm telling you is the real stuff. People were really cool.
Bell bottoms.
Like leisure suits and stuff like that.
Ah, brother.
No.
White collars.
Jesse's looking it up.
I'm looking it up. I don't know what a leisure suit is.
He doesn't even know what a leisure suit is.
Those are great. My goodness.
That's for what I grew up in. So you're going to get a bit of a different perspective my guess is that Sue is like Sean and Ron and Michelle. When I think of childhood, I think of the 60s.
Gotcha.
till the 70s. So
Yeah, there's a big difference.
Yeah.
What I would say is my biggest bad that I insisted upon with my pretty conservative mom, and I won, was long hair, parted down the middle. And I had like the
feathered.
Oh,
Pictures.
I want to see a picture.
I mean, it was, I looked, at least it was clean though. I mean, it wasn't, all greasy and stuff.
Dang, wow.
No, but
Well,
about the time, the hippie time, I mean, the unwashed look was pretty popular. It really was.
so you were a step up from there at least. You were taking showers. So.
Well, she let me have the hair, but I had to wash it once in a while.
Gotcha. The concession. How about you, Michelle? You kind of said a little bit. I don't know if you have more to say.
Yeah, a little bit. I remember man, I loved rainbows. Remember when rainbows were like such a thing? I had this rainbow hoodie that I probably wore way too much, but that was like one of my favorite clothing items I remember. But yeah, and then the hair thing. And I had in the middle of my junior high age, we moved from Pennsylvania, pastoring small churches there, my dad was, to Loma Linda, California. Bam, threw me in at 7th grade. And it was the culture shock of, I was like, what are people wearing? I was so out of it, just style wise. I remember going to Sabbath school and the girls were wearing pantyhose and I'm like, what? I'm not old enough. It was just this whole culture shock to get used to that transition. I remember that being a major deal.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Man.
What about you, Ron?
Oh boy.
Well, actually, sorry, Ron, before you go,
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask Michelle. Michelle, you grew up a pastor's kid. Did that affect how radical you ever got? Did you get more radical than other people in your dress?
And some of the questions you'll ask, I'll refer to this just because it's such a part of my history is being a pastor's kid. Clarence is our pastor, so you guys know him well. Because of, you can either have a great experience or a horrible experience. I think I don't see any middle ground with PKs, usually. And I had a great experience being a PK. My dad is so genuine, you know that. And he always, everything you saw out in public and from the pulpit and from all that stuff was the same stuff we got at home. I was just really blessed by that. And my personality is similar to my dad's, so I was involved in the church stuff from a very young age, in teen leadership and music groups and all of that. And so
you never really had to rebel dress-wise.
No, and the times, I remember some of the two big issues, this is hilarious, but was the color of nail polish we were allowed to wear. Okay, so remember, Pennsylvania to California. So that was a big discussion topic, I remember. Yeah. And my sister wanted to rebel more. And my parents, she's younger. And my parents were, I don't know, good or bad, their parenting tactic was, okay, what age did Michelle choose to do it? And then you can do it at that age or by the time you turn 18. So it was, the nail polish thing was a big deal early on. And then I remember long discussions with my dad about jewelry. That was another biggie. And about pastoral ministry. I thought about doing that for a period of time as my major. And of course, you can imagine in the late 80s, that was way more cutting edge than it even is now. Yeah, and so we had some heart-to-hearts about whether that was something that was smart for me to pursue. Yeah. I chose to pursue education and teaching, but and then the whether I would get my ears pierced or not, which was a discussion that I remember sitting on his bed going through scripture about that. So
it looks like you won. So
I did, but I waited till I was probably 22. Yeah. So older.
Well, so Ron, now you're our grand finale. What you got?
Well, I hope my mother watches this, and she'll lie and say she forgot about this, but she used to make me wear hand-me-downs from my sister. And,
I know, right?
and I remember this shirt, and it was buttoned, of course, on the wrong side. She goes, "Oh, no one will notice. No one will notice." Yeah, do you think they noticed?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was quite a traumatic experience for me in, I don't know, 5th or 6th grade, something like that.
Wow.
But I think that my styles have not changed as my wife and daughters think they should. And so I'll say something like, "How about this?" And they'll say, "That's out of style." And they say that as if it matters to me, and it doesn't.
See,
So
Ross is
the-
nodding his head.
So the
I'm with you, Ron.
socks and sandals, denim short pants, and
Light
actually,
colored jeans.
I told Michelle a year or two ago, I said, "I want some more banded collar shirts." She goes, "Those are out of style. You can't find them." I said, "I don't care." So we actually bought some shirts, and I paid someone to cut the collars off. I'm wearing a banded collar right now, and it looks pretty awesome.
Hey, those are coming back. I got a couple
They're
without
coming
collars.
back. Oh, they're coming back.
Yeah.
So probably one of the worst outfits I ever did, though, was the one that you're seeing today. If you can see, I got pajamas on the bottom, and I got my sport coat and my banded collar.
Well, nice. That we'll just go with today was the worst one. I'm glad that you showed us that though. I was curious. So, how long have you guys been a part of Gig Harbor? And Ron and Michelle, why don't we start with you?
We've been here. We were
Day
part
one.
of, part of
Yeah.
the original small group that worked together for a couple years to try to problem solve and decide what we were going to do when we were transitioning from Tacoma Central, and the organization of how this all started and all of that. So yeah, we've been here 10 and a half years now, I guess.
Yeah.
It'll be 11 in June.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you guys.
Sorry, what was that?
You guys will probably have already tried to strike it from your memory, but I actually technically preached the first sermon in that church.
Right.
Wow.
So it wasn't very good. Don't go back and look.
Hey, that's something you'll always have is first sermon.
That's right.
John, how long have you been part of Gig Harbor?
Me?
Sean.
Oh,
Yeah.
you know, actually, my roots go back probably farther than everybody here, back to Tacoma, the original Tacoma Central, the old building. And then, you know, I would visit my dad every other weekend when we would go. And I got to be part of the new Tacoma Central Seventh-day Adventist Church when it was being built. I used to mow the lawns. I used to pressure wash the roof. But as part of Gig Harbor, November 7th, 2015, I think, was the day that I signed the guest book the first time. And that was, I think, a week and 2 days after Dad had his kidney removed. So came to church with a couple relatives and yeah.
Yeah.
So
wow.
only 4.5 years or so.
Yeah.
Seems like longer.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
I've known all the names in the church, and they may have heard my name. I knew Ron and Michelle a little bit before attending Gig Harbor, but yeah.
Well, Russ and Sue, how about you? I know because you guys have in different periods of time, right? Am I wrong on that?
No, we started together.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember that.
2015.
Yeah, because you guys had been part of other church and you were looking for. Yeah. Okay, I remember that now.
We were doing the church hopping thing every weekend and landed at Gig Harbor, and
Yeah.
actually the first time that we visited was the summer before, the summer of 2014, and it wasn't the right place at that time for us, and
Although we enjoyed it quite a bit.
yes, and so it was always right here.
Yeah.
We continued our search, and January 31st of 2015 we ended up back at Gig Harbor, and you all have been stuck with us ever since.
Well, so yeah.
Sorry, I thought that Sean started much sooner than November. I thought that it was like right around the time that we started.
It was right after right after Mike had his kidney out. So
Wow.
Mm.
Well, so in all that time, in 10 and a half years approximately for you, Ron and Michelle, and about 5 years now, or 4.5, 5 years for the rest of you, what's been a highlight, or what's been the highlight in that period of time for you? And Russ and Sue, if you want to start.
Oh, go ahead.
Relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Russ?
Mine has been more, it's more, well, let me tell you. What my experience is, this church is so different than any church that I've ever been to, is number one, the foundational knowledge of the lay person is really high. The Christian foundational knowledge.
Mhm.
And that can lead to pieism and I mean, dogma, the whole 9 yards, but it just doesn't here.
Mhm.
And go in and have a conversation of extreme depth and maybe even disagreement, oftentimes disagreement. And it still is a very positive thing. You just don't find that.
Yeah.
You just don't find that in the average church. In my experience, even when I was a child, that's not there.
Yeah.
Either follow the doctrine of that particular denomination like this, or you're not gonna have a very easy, well, you're not gonna have a very pleasant of it, a lot of churches. But what I enjoy so much here, and what really sold me on it, is the thirst for knowledge, the thirst to discuss. I mean, we can go to a party, a social event, anybody in this church, and you know what a lot of people are talking about there at that social event? Christ.
Yeah.
I mean, they're talking about things that matter, and not about, I've been to churches where as soon as the sermon is over, you don't hear anything else about Christianity, gospel, or Christ, or anything else. It's about work, it's about football games, it's about, my week that's coming up or that just passed. So, and that's very refreshing. It's sold me, because that's where I'm at. I have a thirst for that. And I find a place that really satisfies that.
Yeah.
Hope I
That's
didn't
good.
ramble.
No, that's good. Sean, what about you? What's been a highlight for you?
well, let me take you back to May 2016, and the first song that I got to sing. Let me share it with you.
Picked up a light. Oh my word.
He was ready for that.
It's been a really, honestly, to pin it down, I can't pin it down. It's been a highlight reel since November 2015. All not living up to my potential for so many years, and now this church has pushed me and embraced me and put me in positions to live up to that potential, and giving a sermon, singing up front, having my dad witness these things, they're all highlights.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah.
How about you, Ron and Michelle? What's been a highlight?
Well, as you may have guessed, I enjoy music and I enjoy playing music.
I didn't have any idea. I never.
I thought I'd share it because a lot of people don't know that. But this is the first church that I have been to that I have been able to play music without one hand tied behind my back. And I think we're going to talk about what's meaningful and all of that, but just to touch on it, for somebody who really connects through music, that's incredibly meaningful.
Yeah.
The other things that have been highlights for me is the new additions, the adding the people, and although we don't feel it week to week, there's been some sense of pride with the moving on our trajectory towards being a full-fledged church, and I think that's a big deal.
Yeah. That was, and just having with the music thing, I mean, it's just being able to do it with our kids as a family thing, that's certainly, and in all the time, it's been really fun. My dad and I reflect once in a while to actually do ministry together with my father, because have always been in different places where we talk about what we were doing separately. This has just been really fun for us to do that, the two of us. And then I'm echoing absolutely Suzanne, the friendships and the relationships. I mean, just it's incredible. It's our network, it's our people, it's who we want to be with and spend time with, and have the conversations that are light and fun, as well as not, like Russ, when we're getting, we have conversations and we can get into things, and we know that these people are doing life with us in a way and relying on Christ and uplifting us in ways that just, you can't get that anywhere else.
Yeah, that's huge. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, Russ, you kind of pointed this out. You're just a little bit older than others in the group, which just means you're just that much wiser. What was that? I didn't hear you, but that just means you're just a little bit wiser. So, but here's a couple of questions that I wanted to ask specifically about the age group or phase of life that you all are in. And the first thing is, so you're kind of in that middle-aged area of life. Kids are out of the house, or you're not retirement age, but you're not starting off, necessarily. I know, Sue, you're doing schooling to start a new thing, but still you're kind of in this middle-aged phase of life. So what are some of the things that your age group brings to the church that are maybe different? And they don't have to be totally different, but maybe different than other groups.
Are you asking us?
Anybody?
I think one of the things that our group brings is continuity and some steadiness. One of the things that there's a negative that I think we bring, and I'll just say me, but I think there's some of it in our generation, and it was highlighted last week. I think we have some tendency to look down on the newer generation and the young people, and again, I'll just say me, but I was probably just as foolish when I was that age. Maybe I was worse, and not everyone who's young is that foolish. Yeah. And so I think one of the things that we don't want to be labeled and categorized in a negative way, and I think a positive thing we can bring is making sure that we're not just rolling our eyes and saying, "Oh, those millennials again." Yeah, some of them, but not all of them.
Yeah.
Well, and I think just some of the blessing that we have, I mean, I'll talk from our home particularly, is we're at a stage where we have a house, we're established, that kind of thing. So we're able to open that up and include as many people as we can pack in at once. I was walking outside because I couldn't stand the inside anymore the other day. Walked down to the waterfront, and I'm like, I cannot wait till all our friends can be here again. You know what I mean? It's just that kind of thing, and the different ages that have come to GHAF, and just kind of bringing all of them in together in any kind of setting we possibly can, has really, I think it's given us a better understanding of those age groups, and we have a little bit of wisdom to share. Like, we have some of the young parents who will come and ask us questions, you know what I mean, those kind of things. So I think that's kind of where it is, a little bit more just, I don't know, stability and comfort in our own skin. That makes sense.
Yeah, that seemed very, not that others won't have others say, but that felt very comprehensive of a lot of the strengths that I see in people in your phase of life and in your age group. So yeah,
I think this age group, not speaking for myself, but from what I have observed, it's that age group that went to their parents' church and maybe didn't have the greatest experience. They lived through it, they grew up in it, and they knew that they got the foundation, but they knew that this is what they wanted for their church, and then that's where the mission statement comes from for our church. I mean, that I think having that base and knowing what they didn't want it to look like anymore and what it could look like. I think that this middle-aged group brings a lot of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because
the middle ground between it's you know, everything that you hear now is okay boomer and versus the millennials, and we're right in the middle where we can see both sides of it and we can sort of mediate and try to walk that middle ground, and we recognize like what Sean was saying, the good part, and we'll carry those forward, but then we're not so set in our ways that we can't embrace the change and the new ideas from younger generations.
Yeah. I was just looking up the differences, the generational times, and I think Russ, you have the privilege of being the boomer in the room. What do you think? What do you think about strengths of people in your phase of life or anything like that?
You know, I'll be honest, I don't know why this question, I could not identify with a generation on this question. And I think because when you say boomer, you sort of have this stereotype that you see as a person. And I don't think any generation is like that. There's a huge range of people within that. But I'll go back to what Sean said. Came out of Tacoma Central knowing what you didn't want and shaping what you did want in a church. I came out of a denomination that I wanted nothing to do with. So it was very similar to that experience, Sean, that you're talking about. I left, and I left for decades. I left Christianity for decades. So when I decided I still believe in God, to find the right people to share that with, that was a bit of a search. And when we found it was very, very satisfying to be part of that growth process that they were. So yeah, what Sean said, it almost mirrored what Sean said exactly, except for the time. Like 40 years, right?
Well, that's well, Russ, I do agree with you that generational lines are not a we can use them to pigeonhole people way too easily. There are aspects of that which certain generations grew up with different things that may affect how a person thinks or believes or things like that. But yet at the same time, we're so different. But it's also interesting because if we just talk about phase of life, if we move away generations and talk about phase of life, a lot of what you guys said, bringing stability, bringing a place to have people. Like, I mean, if you guys want to come over to my house, I can fit about 7 of you. I haven't built the equity to have more than that. Having the time behind you of having raised kids, worked in a job for a while, just experienced a certain level of life that brings wisdom with it, all of that. I mean, it's such a huge asset to the church and to everyone, that even people who are older than you and younger than you. It's a huge asset to everyone. Now I have a hard question to ask you, and the one that hurts a little bit more. What are some of the weaknesses of either your generation or your phase of life? And Ron, you had kind of said a little bit about that.
Yeah. He did.
Yeah. If I heard you correctly, feeling judgmental or looking down on people who haven't lived as much life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are certain things that you just don't get without experience, and that just means you have to live long. You have to keep breathing more hours, and so there is something to be said for that. But also, I think that we should have the wisdom to not belittle those who haven't lived as long and those who see things differently.
And it's somewhat and this may relate just to being a boss or business owner or whatever, but it transitions to that too, just the kind of the work ethic thing. And so that comes out in the church part, where especially with Ron, where he practices a lot for music and he wants to know that he's put in his all. And some of the younger generation is kind of like not always there. So he's like,
I'll figure it out,
gave you
Bam.
lots of stuff to practice with. Why don't you guys come prepared? That kind of thing. And so, but I think so there's a tendency to be frustrated at some of those differences or that kind of stuff. And I think what has helped us and Ron's grown with age and changed and mellowed more as he's gotten older. But I think it's more just the ability to just say, oh, okay, let's try to find any way that we're going to get through to this, and that's what we have to do with our staff, just in their 20s. Okay, we have to get along with these people. How do we communicate? And so it's more of, and he'll ask me that. He'll be like, I don't know. What do I do? How do I get this point across? And so it's conversations like that where we kind of have to evaluate where we're coming from, why it's frustrating to us, and grapple for a new way to get through that.
Well, and it's probably conversations that I was way too smart to have 10 or 15 years ago, because I knew I knew a lot more.
Right.
Well, if I'm hearing you correct, Michelle, you're saying that a potential weakness is in ignorance of how to interact with someone who is in a different phase of life.
Yeah, it's like you're speaking a different language sometimes. And I don't,
yeah.
Right.
And that's, and weaknesses aren't even something that's your fault. It's just, I don't know. So,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
How about Sean or Russ or Sue? What do you sense as a weakness of people in your generation or phase of life?
I think, I don't know. We kind of want to be the problem solvers and the because we have so much knowledge. We have the idea, and why can't you young people figure it out with us? Why do we have to bring you along? Why we worry a lot about the rest of the other generations not getting it, but because we get it so well. And I think we need to release some of that, and the rest of them are just as smart as we are, and if they have that faith base, they're gonna grow and blossom into what we hope for our church, I think. I think we worry a lot.
Yeah, no, that's really insightful. Thank you for sharing that. Russ or Sue?
Yeah, what they said.
Yeah, that's totally fine. You don't have to have anything. If you have something to add, go for it. If you don't, that's totally fine. So.
For me, I don't feel like I have more knowledge than the younger generation, or I don't feel like I don't know. I still feel like a baby Christian every day. Like I'm still every day. And I want that. I want to always feel like I'm getting more knowledge, and that I don't ever want to feel like I know it all. And in this journey, I'm far from feeling like I know it all. So I don't know.
I'll just say this, and this is a specifically to you, Sue, and not a knock on anybody else that will hear this or anyone else in this conversation. But I do feel like there is something unique about you, which is you don't seem like my age, but you seem less. There seem to be less barriers, if that makes sense. And that's cool. Like
that's cool.
And it's not to say, and it's not to say negative things about anyone else, but just I think it's a gifting that you've been given specifically, which is really cool. That you seem to relate, and I think people who are older would say the same thing. So I think that's really cool. So yeah.
Awesome.
Russ, what do you think? What are some of the weaknesses?
I'm guilty of this myself. So I'm not pointing fingers at a generation, but I am guilty of this, and I see it, and it's been passed down from generation to generation. It's getting worse. And there's a reason for it. I understand there's a reason, a societal reason for it. But we become so protective of our children that almost growing up for them so much more difficult than it was for us. When I was a kid, as long as I made it home by dinner time, which was dark, I never heard a peep, right? I mean, I was on my own from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, and there was never, that's just the way it was.
Yeah.
And that's the way I grew up, and we learned a lot that way. And again, I'm guilty because I have a child, and I did the helicopter thing, right? I don't want that child to be hurt. And this society has changed quite a bit. I understand that. It has. But I don't think it's changed to that extent. So I think we've become so protective that kids nowadays don't grow up as quickly as we did. They don't. They mature slower because we don't allow them to grow up. And I don't know, Michelle, Ron, what your experience is, but I think that is a generational thing. And maybe it sort of came out of the Cold War a little bit, but I think more along the lines of mass murder started happening in the 70s, and they got worse and worse and worse. We never had that when I was, a baby.
We had it. We just didn't know about it. It's technology. That's what it
wasn't
is.
as prevalent though. And so I understand the difference, the changes in society, which makes us do that. But I think the pendulum swang to overprotection, and I don't think it ever stopped. I think it's
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you can even see the cartoon of in the 60s that the parent was upset with their child for getting bad grades, and now they're upset with the teacher for giving them bad grades. Now that's a stereotype, but I think that's some of the things that you're talking about is that, oh no, my little Johnny couldn't possibly have done that.
I'll tell you what, if I came home and said I got a whipping at school, I got a whipping at home too.
Right.
You must have done something wrong. And back then, they give you a whipping in school.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was before y'all's time or not.
Yeah.
I got one, but my brother in the principal's office on the daily getting a woman.
You got a paddle in it. I don't know. Maybe that was a 60s thing.
70.
Yeah.
What did the 70s? Well, actually, that's a perfect segue into this question that I wanted to ask. I want to ask another question after, but which is, what was it like? For someone in my age group, or maybe even a little bit older, or for folks who are older than you, tell us a little bit about what it was like for a lot of you growing up in the 70s and 80s, or Russ, 60s, 70s. What were some of the big moments, the things that kind of even to this day affect the way you think, some of the bigger movements that you found yourself a part of, anything like that? And Sean, I don't know if you want to start.
70s, 80s, skateboards, BMX bikes, long hair, torn clothes, staying out past dark, the front door always being unlocked at home, and not having to worry about a lot of things, coming home and making a quesadilla after work or after school because mom and dad or stepdad weren't going to be home for a couple hours. It was just a different. We hung out in the neighborhood. Everybody went down to the bus stop with their bikes, and we hung out. We talked, and we threw eggs at buses and things and toilet papered houses. I don't know if they still do that now, but
Not now.
That's expensive.
but even though we did those things, we did learn the consequences of our choices. So, but just having it. It was just a lot more outdoorsy and a lot more. You just saw kids together all the time, and now when I maybe I'm just being labeling kids, but maybe I just don't see them just hanging out and doing activities other than You know, I'm guilty of it, looking on my phone or being.
Well, no, it is different though. Kids are growing up different, and so
Yeah,
that's part
I
of.
mean, I don't know if there was ever a time that I didn't have scabs on my knees and my elbows and everybody. You know, it was just an adventure. It seemed like it was such an adventure back then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
awesome. Sean.
You made it an adventure. We would get up in the morning and, you know, on the weekends, we would be out the door by 7 in the morning and just play. You know, you went down the street and you knocked on the doors and you got all the kids together and you just went and ran the neighborhood until the street lights came on and you knew it was time to go home and have dinner. And it was all, and we weren't egging cars. We weren't doing things like that. Roller skating and riding bikes and open and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, we were doing BB gun fights and putting people's eyes out. That's what we were.
The original Christmas story.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So
That was the difficult part about, you know, raising my kids. My girls are 22 and almost 30. For me, we were free range. Now they call it free range. Back then, you were just kids.
yeah,
And it was my kids being raised with technology. It was a constant battle because with me, it's go outside and play, but they wanted to be with their friends on computers and iPhones and all of that. And that's not childhood. It's not supposed to be.
well, so that's something that I will probably talk with some of the even younger generation next week about. But tell me a little bit about, because I had a little bit of that growing up as you know, early, like millennials. We grew up pretty much until mid-teens. You know, that's when technology started to hit. So we kind of had a little bit of the free range stuff. But tell me a little bit about what it was like, especially getting into your teenage years and some of the things that would have affected your thoughts. Like you guys grew up around Vietnam, around the Make Love Not War movement, and much more that was you. Sorry, Russ, that was you. You guys grew up in the aftermath of some of that. So tell me.
Yeah. When we were growing up, there wasn't any of that stuff. It was after all of, you know, Vietnam and all of that was over. It was before all of the Middle East stuff, for the most part, started.
She had a very short.
Yes, very short. No, but in the 80s, and I mean, what was it? Oh, the Berlin Wall, like that was, you know, huge. But other than that, like politically, world events, things like that, it didn't. There really wasn't anything so huge that it interfered with my childhood.
Yeah.
Ron and I were talking about just about we both grew up, we'll call them Adventist ghettos. I'll explain that term, but so like an Adventist community that had, so basically my junior high and high school was in Loma Linda, California. That is the most Adventist community almost.
There's a lot of Adventists.
The entire town closes down on Saturday, no stores open, you know, no mail delivery, that kind of stuff. And and it was more in terms of the Adventist religion and being a pastor's kid, like I mentioned before, and being heavily involved in the church and the school in leadership and music groups and stuff. That was the church and school and all that was like my life. So it was very, it was a very liberal Adventist religious community. Like if you know what I mean by that. So I didn't have a lot of the oppressive feelings and partly it was because my parents were helpful with that, but I didn't have the negative connotations of Adventism that came with that. Ron was thinking about, he was in Walla Walla, so it was a little different.
And it was, I remember Walter Ray and Desmond Ford. You don't know those names?
I know.
I know Desmond Ford.
Yeah, Walter Ray wrote a book about that Ellen White was lying about everything she said.
It's controversial in our church and in those communities.
And they would come to the Walla Walla area. Of course, it was off campus somewhere, but you could go listen to their lectures, and there was some legitimate concern that the brethren were had a spy there, seeing who was there, because if you were employed by the church, your job might be on the line.
If you went to one of those,
and it was a time when we questioned everything. We questioned the church, and we questioned authority, and we said, we had conversations in my house. No, the church is wrong on this. No, think for yourself. And in many ways, that was a good thing. But it was interesting because it was the same time as Michelle, but it was a totally different place because she didn't experience that.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because obviously where you grew up makes a huge impact on some of the events and different things that happen.
I
think,
I think it. Maybe I may be wrong in this. Maybe thinking I'm unique or we're unique, but it seemed like at the beginning of the '80s and through the '80s and '90s, that was the beginning of the really separation of the left and right. How they really started a divide between the two. I grew up. My dad was conservative, right wing. My mom and stepdad were polar opposite. He was the president of the ACLU in Pierce County, and so I had during the week it was left, every other weekend it was right, and I during those times, I mean, that's for our age group, that's when we really formed our beliefs of left, of progressive left or right. It seems like that was the beginning of really a kind of a divide. But I mean, our church, the divide may be there politically, but we found a way to get along and love each other despite our differences. So
that's awesome.
Not the rest of the world. I mean, not but it doesn't seem like the rest of the world follows our lead. How's that?
No, it's true.
Can I comment on that, Jesse?
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, Ron, I think it's interesting. This is one of the reasons I wanted us to talk about this, Sean, because the reason that, or you saying that, helps me understand a little bit more of how we get to where we're at today, because I grew up where it was always just polar opposite. So it's helpful for me to understand what it was like for you growing up because it informs my present. So, but yeah, sorry, go for it, Ron.
No, one of the things as I look at Facebook and people posting things, even things that they know are not true but supports their position, what we really need is what I think Russ mentioned in our church, and that is we can have a conversation and we can be polar opposite in disagreement and we can still be friends. And for some reason, the political polarization is teaching us that we can't do that, and that's what's ruining the country. That's the problem, because if you don't talk to people you disagree with, you will never learn from them, and at least you will never learn to understand their point of view. And if your position is so weak that you can't hear a differing position, then you probably need to rethink it.
I know, I totally agree. And actually, I would love to have like a whole conversation around politics and Christianity, because I think there's a lot of stuff to be said. But it is interesting to hear that, like, you saw it really start to polarize in that time. And not that there weren't polarizing things before, but just sharing a little bit of my experience. It's been crazy because it's almost never been together. There's been, other than like 9/11 and a few moments like that, where I was like, oh man, we feel like a whole country right now. It's been as opposite as ever, and that's all I've ever really known. So quite different. But
or even that's even a feeling right now. I feel like that it's more unifying, even though we're in our isolation. That's been one of the, if you can say there's a positive out of the COVID crisis. I have been on the phone a lot, just calling different vendors and companies and that kind of stuff. And every single call has turned personal, and somebody
Yeah.
has a story and they're isolated and they want to share.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how different that is.
Yeah, it's reminding us that we're all in this together. So
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, I got two more questions for all of you. And the first
There-
is,
I
what's
have a
that?
couple on that one. We didn't really talk about, I forgot what the question was, so I'm just going to tell you what I was thinking
Go
about.
for it.
When I was in my young childhood, 6, 7, 8, my dad was an ex-Marine, so he sort of imbued that into me. My mom was completely anti-military, but he was still able to do that. But I remember many times as a child when the house would just shake, and sometimes in the neighborhood the window would break here and there, and that was a jet flying overhead, breaking the speed, the sound of Mach, because they could do that. There was no restrictions on doing that, and I remember that so vividly. And it was this feeling of our government was in control, right? It was, our government was right. The United States was right. We were strong. And then that went away because it was banned. And then toward the end of the 60s, Vietnam was on every night. I mean, it was on our TV every night. And I was only 8, 9 years old, but things didn't look so good, and the news reports make me think maybe things aren't so good. And then you roll into the early 70s and Nixon is up for impeachment. He never got impeached, but only because he resigned. And that was just that totally, even though I didn't understand politics, my government, that I had grown up as a child, was always there and was always something you could trust, wasn't that anymore. And it was created a tremendous amount of confusion. It really did. In a child of only 12 or 13.
Yeah.
So when children of 12 or 13 are looking at things like of that magnitude, what are they seeing? Right? And worse things than I saw then.
Yeah.
The two parties so vicious. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, what do they think? What is there? When I was a child, I had this secure feeling, right? I had a secure feeling. As the 70s progressed and all the demonstrations in Penn State and everything that happened, I lost that.
Yeah.
That was a big event in my life.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, Russ, because it's so interesting. I talked with some people from around your age from North Hill, and they said similar things, that there was this trust in the government and there was this kind of feeling of security. And it's so interesting because I don't know about the rest of you, but I know for my generation, we've never grown up with that level of security or trust in the government. And it broke around your time, but yeah, even now into now, it's just like nobody really trusts it. There's an even greater push towards, we don't trust any authority at all. At all.
Think about the things that occurred, like the Watts riots. I don't even know if you guys types of things. Those early riots in LA, long before Let's All Get Along, that happened all before.
Wow.
So you see this, and it just sort of puts it in perspective to me, and it did then, and that sort of actually created my path into the military. I wanted to try to be a part of the solution, which I realized after I got there, and it's not really the part of the
24 years.
But it's important because you felt like that was part of the solution, and that was a driving force to you. Like there was
in the 70s, the late 70s, the country was split.
Yeah.
Very military. You were either on one side or you were on the other.
Okay. Yeah.
In
One
a
or the
different
other.
way than it is now.
And also remember the denomination I came out of was totally anti-military, and I was trying to get away from that as far as I could. That was part of it as well.
He was a rebel. Yeah. I love history. I love talking about this, so I could talk about it for a lot longer. But I do want to just ask these last two questions. what is, and I'll ask them together if you don't mind. And the first is, what do you find your relationship with God being nowadays in your life? And what also do you hope and dream for in the church? And so if we just kind of want to go through and Ron, if you want to start.
Sure.
And so yeah, what's your relationship with God like at this point in your life, and what are your hopes and dreams for the church?
I struggle with my prayer life. The prayer group that we do has helped me and has helped with accountability, and I still struggle. I am most blessed through music, and so that's not a struggle. But that's an area where I continue to need to improve. As far as where I want to see this church go, I want us to keep adding families like Russ and Sue, like you and Chloe, like Sean. I want us to keep growing and maintain the good things that we have.
Yeah.
That's my vision for the church, is to grow and not lose the good small church atmosphere that we have.
Yeah.
I think that, Ron, I do, I don't know, my relationship, I think we talked about, like his family questioning and stuff with the church and just asking questions and questioning things. I'm a little more, I don't know, simple and childlike in the way that I just take things at face value, and I believe what God has said in the Bible, and I claim that, and it's so refreshing to me to just study and read. The accountability helps me. I think the prayer group, that's helpful to me. Having people in my home that live here, that are kind of on that same page, and that we're holding each other accountable for that kind of thing. And then usually it helps me to, I have a Bible study going that I usually do with at least one other person. So right now I have a younger person, she's in her 20s, and the two of us get together every couple weeks, and that helps with my perspective of that age group. And
that's awesome.
It's also an accountability to stay on, and it's a way to share and to stay connected. And I think the way that we share with each other what we're studying and what we're learning and grappling with, or just how the Lord's impressing us, that makes it so personal.
Yeah. I just want to affirm you that you're even doing that, because a lot of people in my age group want guidance and wisdom, and someone who just wants to invest in them. Not even so much like we don't want like a ton of advice given to us, but we just want someone who cares, but who is farther along in life. And so I just want to affirm you for doing that. That's really awesome. So, Sean, what about you? What do you find your relationship with God to be like at this point in your life, and what are your hopes and dreams?
Well, of course, I didn't have a relationship really with God until about 4.5 years ago. But after I came to GHAF, the first couple of years, I would say my relationship was more of just recognizing that God is in my life. I had His grace and His mercy, and I put Him in my nightstand, and that was great. And God's working in my life. God's working in my life. But it was a couple of years ago, I sought forgiveness from a friend of mine. And that friend said, Sean, I forgive you, but you need to accept this gift and this new hope. And I realized right about that time that accepting God in my life, accepting His grace, accepting His forgiveness, accepting all the promises that He has is much more of an action word than just, okay, I'm just going to set these
just
here.
Knowing it.
No, yeah, just knowing it. But so the last couple of years, I've really, accepting means acting, committing, turning things over to God, His will. It's much more of an action. So it's much more living out the promises and the truths in the Bible and the gospel, the good things that come along with living that life. So I really feel like things are moving. I'm in an active relationship with God. So
Sean,
a lot of it comes from Celebrate Recovery. It's a program that I'm in for my past addictions. And with GHAF and Celebrate Recovery, I'm constantly in this act of witnessing for the good things that God has done in my life, which is, I'm sure, part of His will for my life. So it's much more active. And and I, as far as what I want for the church, I mean, I'm so spoiled. This is being the first real church experience. I mean, what a place to land, right? That I can't imagine it being any better, and I don't want it to change. I would like it to grow. I don't want anybody to go. I don't want anybody to retire and start going on trips. So no, I just I hope we can all adopt, and that's really what we, John and the Leadership Council has been working towards, being much more active and in the community and with each other. So yeah, that's what I'd like to see. So,
That's awesome. Sean, I just want to say the idea of acceptance and belief being an active thing. It's like there are people who have been in church their entire lives, and they're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and they've accumulated libraries of knowledge, but don't look a lot like Jesus. And so you figuring that out kind of 3-4 years into a 3 to 5 years into a relationship with God is such a huge thing. That's awesome. And I want to say that. Russ and Sue, what are your thoughts? What's your relationship with God like, and what are your hopes and dreams for the church?
I'm ashamed to admit that I am, at this point, the past couple of years, I trust fully that He has me. And so I haven't put forth any effort to build that relationship further. I've allowed my focus to be on school and the marriage and everything else. And I know that I need to make more of an effort. It's any relationship, if it's just one-sided, and sadly it is one-sided. He's given me everything, and I haven't made any effort to, I don't know how to word it.
Reciprocate or just
yeah, to put effort into building the relationship. And now that we're in this quarantine, this isolation, you would think that this is the however, my impetus every morning when I would be going to work or going to school or whatever, blaring the Christian music, and that sort of started, that filled me with all my feelings, and so then I could have I could talk to God. I just have conversations. I'm not driving anywhere. I don't. So my day isn't starting out with that, and shame on me. I'm not making the effort to sit down. My prayer life is horrible right now. So yeah, and Russ and I, we talked a little bit about that earlier today, is that I need to get in a routine. I have, my routines are long gone, and now I need to get back into that. And as far as the church, I'm looking forward to it growing. When new people come into the church, I just, my heart swells at being able to share what we've received from GHAF with other people, and the littles, watching the littles grow. that just fills my heart, just the thought of being part of that. So
Sue, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for being honest, because I think there are far more people who just have never said what you've said out loud, and you're saying it, and I think that's a really helpful thing that a lot of people will identify with. I just want to say that. And the second thing is not to diminish the importance of having specific time or anything like that with God, but when you're hard on yourself and saying, oh man, I just haven't put any effort in, it actually makes you want to do it less. And so and then the last thing I'll say is that one of the most important things that I have found in a relationship with God, so this is to you and to anyone else who's in a similar space, is the importance of slowing down, not just a like, okay, I'm going to stop for a second, but like to just say, I'm going to slow down for 10 minutes and just be with Jesus, whether it's opening up my Bible or praying or just sitting there in the acknowledgement of the presence of God with me. That is the beginning of more things over time. It doesn't have to be in that moment, but that has been a very helpful thing in my life. So yeah, just wanted to say that. Russ, what about you? You want to close us out with the most epic, no, I'm just kidding.
What?
You get the last word.
So yeah, what's
Lingo.
Yeah,
what's your relationship with God like at this point, and what are your hopes and dreams for the church?
I'll start with my relationship. I agree with Ron 100%, and I agree with Sue. My prayer life is not what it should be. It just isn't. And I believe you actually gave a sermon on prayer not that long ago. It might have been a year or so ago, and I took notes, and I still am not where I need to be. And I don't know if it's a human condition thing, and it's something we all work on until the day it's all over with. But I don't think I am where I should be. So, and what I find is, I don't know how many books I've read in the last 2 weeks, to be honest with you, quite a few. That's where I end up going is I go, and I read the Bible too, but I go to books and I start approaching the relationship from an academic standpoint. And yeah, get all this knowledge from the old greats. I mean, the guys, the people that really had it together, and it doesn't change here. And I think what I have to focus on is worry less about the details of doctrine, details of theology, and more about the relationship with Christ. And I think that relies on prayer. I really think it does. That's the starting point, and that's the best tool that you have to start that. So that's sort of my focus. So I'm being honest too.
Thank you.
I'm just not. And prayer is not an easy thing.
Yeah, it definitely is, and that is one of the things we're taught very little of in Adventism. I know that for sure, and maybe in other denominations as well. But yeah, it really is. But yeah, at the same time, I think all of you are also, not all of you necessarily, but several of you are doing yourself a disservice of saying that you aren't where you should be. And here's the only reason I say that is because like God is super stoked with who you are and where you're at, and he loves you so much, and I've seen his presence lived out through you guys. And so that's why I say I'm not trying to dismiss what you're saying, but I have seen I've seen Jesus through you guys, and that says something about you and Jesus. So yeah, I think that's the coolest thing. Russ, I just want to say this, or ask this last one. What do you hope?
Oh, yeah, I forgot to say. To be honest, I have the same prayer for the church that Elsie has. A lot of people are praying about it, and that is how to go out and evangelize and show people. And this is a perfect time. Boy, I'll tell you what, it couldn't get time to do it. And we just haven't found, other than that. But you know what I'm saying? Reach out to people that haven't had the exposure that we've had, and somehow at least show them a glimpse of what's there, and not necessarily to bring them into our church, but just bring them to Christ, and we haven't found a good formula for that yet. And I really pray that we can do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. I agree with you, Russ. That's always kind of the struggle. But yeah, thank you all so much for being part of this. It's fun to hear your guys' perspective, the different experiences that you've had, the different perspective you have on church and life and all of that. But I just want to say thank you, and I've really enjoyed getting to know all of you, not just in this time, but outside of this too. And so we miss being able to hang out with you guys in person. And I'm sure that's the biggest bummer out of all of this, but I'm glad that we at least have this.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.